Hello there, and welcome to our next virtual class. Last time we talked about all the changes that happened as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And it seemed like, why are we talking about history? We're supposed to be talking about adolescence. You can't separate them. You have to look at how things used to be to really understand why things are the way they are now. Get situated a little bit here. So, um, where are we going to go now? As you can see on the screen, we're looking at today's rites of passage. One of the last things I said in the previous video was that the rite of passage no longer gave adult status. The rite of passage no longer held its meaning that it did before. Certainly, every culture still has their rites of passage, and they still utilize them, but they do not hold the same legal and social consequences that they did 500 years ago. They don't grant adulthood. So that's a massive change. And we're going to discuss the impacts of that. Well, if you have a population of young adults, or at least young people who would have been considered adult 500 years ago, you got to tell them something, right? We do a good job of placating their sensibilities in a way, and giving them tiny little morsels of adulthood, little tidbits of adulthood throughout their teen years. Let's take a look at some of that. Today's rites of passage. As I was saying, we don't have true rites of passage today that really equate to the way those ritual ceremonies were used before the Industrial Revolution. We celebrate these little milestones, and we treat them like, ooh, you're taking these huge steps towards adulthood. Oh man, you're really getting older now. You're going to be adult in no time. When the reality is, not that many generations ago, they'd already be adult. Examples. Age 12. At age 12, you start to pay adult prices at theaters and restaurants. And it's when you say, Junior, you be quiet, you're 11. So you're not paying as much, right? The adult prices at theaters and restaurants seems like a tiny little deal, but why do they pick that age? What is it about age 12? Why do they do that? It is like a subconscious recognition that they're not little kids anymore. Only a fairly inconsequential one, at least for the 12-year-old, right? At age 12, you can get a hunting license. That's kind of changed in South Dakota here somewhat. And you can actually get a hunting license at younger than 12. Back in my day, oh boy, here we go. Back in my day, it used to be when you were 12, you could get a hunting license after you've passed the hunter safety course, of course. You can babysit. And I think that is actually a Department of Social Services designation. At age 12, you can babysit. I did not look that one up prior to making the presentation. So what else do we have? You can exit elementary school. Or you should be exiting elementary school and beginning middle school. Now there is a transition. That is a transition. Unfortunately, there are many teachers in middle school who continue to treat their young students as though they are in 3rd or 4th grade instead of 6th or 7th or 8th grade. I'm going to go off on that later. All right, I'll save you. Here we go. We'll keep going with this. And this should be a fairly short video, by the way. At age 13, what happens at 13? Well, obviously, you are now a teenager. ooh, you're a teenager now. And people make a big deal out of this. Um, they'll tell their kid, oh, wow, you're a teenager now. Ooh. And so what? What meaning does that have? Not much today. If you were Jewish, you'd have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah for girls, right? And I'm not sure if I spelled that right. I think I did. The bar mitzvah, of course, a traditional rite of passage. Only, what does it mean now? Sadly, it's really more of a birthday party with some religious ceremony thrown in for good measure. It certainly does not grant adult status, right? We'll keep going. PG-13 movies. I like this one because, you know, a day earlier, they were too immature to handle the content of a PG-13 movie. As soon as the clock struck midnight and they turned 13, bam, they were suddenly granted this glob of wisdom and maturity that they would be able to handle PG-13 content. It's amazing, isn't it? Again, we underestimate what our kids can handle and what our kids can really understand. We assume the worst in them, unfortunately, all too often. We'll keep going. What else happens here? Age 14. Age 14, 8th grade promotion. You get out of 8th grade. One of the things that struck me in my time out in California at the middle school I was at, they would have this amazing promotion ceremony from 8th grade. It was just, they went all out. Everything was decorated, and they had a stage set up out in the field, and they rented chairs, and there were flowers and banners, and they spent a lot of money to put this on. I said, why? Why is that so special? The really sad answer was, this was as close as many of those students would get to having a high school graduation. They wouldn't see anything closer than that because they would be dropping out before finishing high school. So 8th grade promotion, some places make a big deal out of it, some don't. Either way, it's another one of those little tidbit things that many parents make a big deal out of, and it's like, ooh, you're moving to high school now. You're going to be in high school. Wow, you're growing up so fast. Again, 500 years ago, it would be a very different story, right? Rite of confirmation for Catholics. We talked about that in another video. Again, the priest is asking, do you want to be Catholic? Because the priest is recognizing the new adult. And when I explained that before, I mentioned age 14 is not the age. It's determined locally, but age 14 is a very common age to have the rite of confirmation. Very common to be tied with 8th grade. We'll keep going. Age 14, South Dakota driver's license. Of course, initially for at least 90 days, it's restricted to driving with another adult in the car. And that's 180 days of driving with another adult if they don't take a driver's education course. Then they can get a restricted license that allows them to drive during certain hours of the day, right? And that stays in effect until they turn 16. And I believe at 16 they have to test all over again. So that is a different thing for South Dakota, age 14. My students in California would just about lose their mind when I tell them. I would first ask who in the room is 14 years old, and a few people would raise their hand. I would say, "Did you know that in South Dakota you could have a driver's license already?" And the whole room would go crazy because they resent not being treated as though they're capable of being responsible. They resent being treated as though they are incapable of responsibility. That resentment plays a huge role as the years progress. We'll keep going. At age 14, some jobs become available. I was driving down the main highway in Pierre, Wells Avenue, and was going by Burger King. And right there on the sign out front, it said, "We hire 14 and 15-year-olds." They will put 14 and 15-year-olds to work. Sort of. Federal labor laws, which were enacted in the worst days of the Industrial Revolution, right? The days when children were working and losing fingers in looms and machinery, etc. They enacted all these child labor laws. The way it sits right now, a 14-year-old can work at the counter. They can take orders. They can hand you your food and take your money and give you back your change. Work the cash register. They cannot go in the kitchen and cook. I would ask my students, "How many of you cook at home?" And all of them would raise their hand. I said, "How many of you make an egg?" And they would all raise their hands. Most of them. I would tell them, "Well, according to the federal government, you're too stupid to know that stoves are hot and knives can cut, and therefore you are not allowed to cook." And again, my students would just about lose their minds at how dumb that is, and express that same resentment that they are not trusted to be responsible. They can work, though. They can, if a job is available, right? We'll keep going. Age 14, average age of first use of alcohol. Again, kind of a little unofficial today's rites of passage. That is not one that I shared with my students, with my middle school students. I'm trusting that they are going to experiment on their own, and that average probably holds true for them as it does anywhere else in the country. You have to wonder what's going on, though. What's going on in their head? I mean, certainly there's a curiosity, there's an experimentation factor, but why? I'm going to talk about that in another video segment, so we'll hold off on that. But keep it in the back of your head. Why, at that age, why is that the average age of first use of alcohol? Away we go. Continuing, at age 15, not a whole lot happens at age 15. If you're Spanish, if you're Latina, if you're a girl, and Hispanic, you might have a quinceañera. You very likely would have a quinceañera. And again, we talked about that before. That is a father presenting his daughter as available for marriage. And what is it now? It isn't that. In most places, it isn't that. But it is a significant cultural recognition that a girl is growing up. Again, tiny little recognition that we're starting to slowly give you these tiny little bits of adulthood and spoon feed it to you in little tiny portions, right? Continuing. By this time, high school has begun. That maybe could have gone under age 14 since we put 8th grade promotion there. But by age 15, certainly, high school has begun. This is a different world. The social structure of high school is very different. And it's, boy, what is the toughest part about high school? It's probably staying focused on academics amidst this intense social structure, and working to maintain relationships and have friends, and experiment with romantic relationships, right? We'll keep going. Age 16. Uh-oh. Oh no. Look at that. That's a mess right there. So those first two are garbage. All right. I'll correct that, and we'll keep going here. So 8th grade promotion, rite of confirmation for Catholics. That was from age 14. At age 16, you get your South Dakota driver's license. It's non-restricted. Many possible jobs become available. Now suddenly at age 16, suddenly you have the maturity to understand that stoves are hot and knives can cut you. So you won't put your hand on the stove, and you won't slice your fingers off if you're working in the kitchen area at Burger King or McDonald's or wherever. The Department of Labor has figured this out, that suddenly at age 16, you have this maturity that you can distinguish that. Amazing, right? So think about this, though. Driver's license plus money from a job equals independence. For many, many teenagers all over the country, if they have a job and they have a driver's license, they probably get an old junker car, and suddenly they have a lot of independence. They can go where they want. They have their own money, and this starts to feel like actual adulthood all of a sudden. That it's a pretty important step right there. This is actually giving maybe more than just a tiny little bit of adult freedom and responsibility. It's giving a fair amount of that, those two things combined. Could they have done this at age 14? Not to the same level, not to the same effect. It really fits with age 16. Especially in other states, most other states, and I didn't look it up, but almost all other states, you get a driver's license at 16. South Dakota, with its agricultural roots, age 14 has been the standard. Well, keep going. Age of sexual consent in South Dakota, age 16. That age 16, age of sexual consent in South Dakota. The law on it is somewhat tricky. If they're under 16 and they engage in sexual relations, the other person had better be under 18. Doesn't absolve them of literally the crime of statutory rape, but it releases them from more harsh penalties. If two high schoolers are both 16 years old, they both have sexual consent, and they don't. This sounds kind of crazy, but the way the law is structured, it is what it is. They don't need parent permission to have sex. They have legal consent on their own to do that. So here we have the law, at least in South Dakota, California, that consent is 18, age 18. So here we have the law in South Dakota, again, recognizing at an earlier age the decision-making capabilities, and to me it recognizes the reality of teenage life. Rather than criminalizing something, it's recognizing the reality and stressing the importance of responsibility, right? We'll keep going. With parent permission, which is kind of ironic, I guess. With parent permission, it's legal to get married in South Dakota at age 16. I would hope not, right? The circumstances of someone under the age of 18, honestly, someone under the age of 20 getting married is probably an unwanted pregnancy, or an unplanned, I shouldn't say unwanted, an unplanned pregnancy. And that is a really complicating life situation for people. So at age 16, South Dakota, with parent permission, you can get married in South Dakota. We'll keep rolling. You can file for emancipation from parents. You hear about that once in a while from like celebrity teenagers whose parents are latching onto their money one way or the other. So they file for emancipation to save their own money that they're earning from whatever their celebrity job is. I was involved in one emancipation case, and I testified to the maturity of the maturity level of the person being emancipated, and I was in favor of that emancipation because the parents were horribly abusive. The parents were terrible, and the kid sadly had grown up and taken on adult levels of responsibility like they're capable of doing. They had done that from a very early age, and had raised themselves essentially anyway. And this kid was incredibly responsible. And that kid, I keep saying kid, I shouldn't. That young adult was granted emancipation from their parent. And that was the right call by that judge, for the reasons I mentioned. We'll keep rocking here. Moving on to age 17. Not a lot happens at age 17. Ooh, you can go to a rated R movie. Ooh, boy, you're really adult now. I had an old movie that I would show my classes, and it had to deal with kind of coming of age, and it was called Planet 12, and it was something I had literally videotaped off of HBO many, many years ago, 20 years ago. And that movie was rated G, TV, G. That movie had all sorts of cuss words in it because it was 12-year-olds being 12-year-olds and speaking the way they speak. But it had cuss words in it that would give it at least a PG-13 rating today, which is ironic given the name of the movie was Planet 12, or the documentary, I should say. So a PG-13 rating. There's a movie right now, I don't know if it's on Amazon or Netflix, and it's called Grade 8 or 8th Grade or something like that. And it's not a documentary, it's a movie, but it's really pretty darn good. And it's rated R. It's rated R. The actress is a 15-year-old, and it's rated R. Really makes sense, right? At age 17, you can, with parent permission again, there's that irony, you can join the military. Consider what's written there on the slide. Life and death levels of responsibility placed on you. if you join the military. If you don't do your job right, somebody can die, right? I know I mentioned in one of the other videos that I asked the question, how many of you know a 16 or 17-year-old you could trust with your life? And my students would laugh. They would think I was joking, that I was being sarcastic about the true nature of 16 and 17-year-olds today. And I was serious. And slowly a couple hands would go up. As I mentioned before, shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't almost all the hands go up? By the age of 16 or 17, shouldn't we all easily know someone who we would trust with our life, who has shown that they have the responsibility and maturity to take on that kind of level of adult thinking? I sure do. And guess what? The military does too. They believe that you can achieve that level of responsibility at age 17, or they wouldn't accept 17-year-olds. Legally, you got to get parent permission first. Good stuff right there. Age 18. Boy, oh boy, it all happens there, right? We'll whip through this quickly. At age 18, you have legal adult status. You have freedom from your parents, and they have freedom from you. I think we all know someone who, as soon as they turned 18, mom and dad were like, get the hell out of my house. Adios. See ya. And think about how horrible that 16, 17-year-old was, how horribly they acted, that at age 18, parents are like, get the hell out of here. That's a pretty terrible thing. And it happens. Moving on. Selective service, the draft, right? You can be drafted into military service. If they have a draft, they don't have that right now. They do have selective service. In the news, the Supreme Court just said women need to register with selective service too. That omitting women is unconstitutional, right? Especially since women are now eligible for combat duty. I'm not sure what to think of that. I guess it's okay. But the draft has always been males over the age of 18. And selective service, what do? You register. You get online and you register, you update your address and contact information, and that's it. And then you get a registration number, and you use that registration number for student loans, for example. You have to have that registration number. We'll keep going. What else? Jury duty. If you're called to jury duty, you got to go, right? If you don't go, and I would tell my students this, said, if you don't go to jury duty, the judge will issue a warrant for your arrest, and they all go berserk. Why do you have to do that? You didn't do anything. I said, yeah, you did do something. You neglected your duty because now you're 18. It isn't all about getting privileges. It's about living up to your responsibilities as an 18-year-old adult citizen. It's not all about getting all the cool stuff and getting the freedom to do certain things you couldn't do before. You have to live up to your responsibilities too. Jury duty is one of those things. Moving on. At age 18, you can vote and be elected to certain offices. Well, age 18. When I turned 18, God, I'm going to tell you how old I am here. When I turned 18, just a few days after I turned 18, I voted in my first election. And I voted for Ronald Reagan for president. November of 1980. Man, I'm old. So, on that note, we'll keep going. Oh, and be elected to certain offices. I'll mention, if you do a Google search, you will find that there are 18-year-olds who are elected mayor. There are 18-year-olds who are elected to school boards. Um, my middle school students thought that would be the coolest thing, to be elected to the school board and be the boss of the superintendent, who's the boss of the principals, who's in charge of the teachers of the school you're probably still attending in high school, right? Pretty cool. You can enter into contracts, own property, buy, use, and possess tobacco products. All these things happen when you turn 18, because magically at the stroke of midnight on your 18th birthday, you suddenly have the ability and the maturity to be able to do these things, where the day before you didn't have that maturity or capability or critical thinking skill to engage in those activities, right? Graduate high school. Some graduate before they turn 18, some graduate when they're 19, but 18 is probably the most common age to graduate high school. I would say most of a senior class is 18 by the end of May. I remember back when I graduated high school, as it was approaching, I thought, whatever. But then the day it happened, I was kind of surprised. I was surprised that it was as big a deal to me personally as that caught me off guard. So graduating high school is kind of the end of an era, the end of forced, mandated education, right? It's the beginning of a new era of freedom to do whatever the hell you want, to an extent. We'll keep going. Oh, sorry. More jobs become available. Age 16, a whole bunch of jobs opened up. At age 18, even more jobs open up. Typically, these are jobs that are a little more dangerous. For example, sheet metal worker, putting up metal buildings like a metal pole barn. You can't do that work under the age of 18. Working with sheet metal has some serious inherent dangers in it. If you're at ground level and somebody drops a sheet of sheet metal, it'll take your arms right off. So there is an inherent danger to doing that work. And because of that, they have an age limit of 18. You must be 18 or older to do that kind of work. There are other jobs like that. You can go on the Department of Labor website and go digging around and see what those are. But at age 18, more jobs become available. And looks like we're done with age 18, the quick version anyway. Yeah, that was quick. Age 19, life after high school. You're starting work and or school, post-secondary school, college, vocational school, something, lower rural community college maybe, right? So you get after it and do your work and work on doing well in those classes because you have a goal in mind. Oh, what is that goal? I'm going to talk about that in another video segment. Moving on. Other than that, nothing really happens at age 19. At age 20, suddenly on your 20th birthday, you are no longer a teenager. That awesome feeling you might have had when you turned 13 and you became a teenager, now being called a teenager is equivalent in your mind to being called a little child. So getting rid of your teenage years and putting those behind you, yeah, you kind of like that. You kind of like that because you recognize that that treatment is a bunch of bull, right? That's really it for age 20, by the way. Hopefully you're continuing to work and or go to school. Age 21, buy, use, and possess alcohol. Because we all know that because there is a law that says you must be 21 to buy, use, or possess alcohol, no one under that age ever buys, uses, or possesses it, right? And I don't think so. It doesn't work like that. But that is the legal age. When I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school, the drinking age for beer, 3-2 beer, was age 18. And I drank beer in high school. Well, not in the high school, but when I was attending high school, there were a whole bunch of us that would go down to one of the 3-2 bars and listen to bands and drink beer and dance and get stupid, right? It was there were a large number of us that did that. And you know, this was in Aberdeen, and Aberdeen being a college town, that made that whole environment even more appealing, more fun. Moving on. What else happens? Age 21, more jobs become available, even more dangerous jobs. Again, the Department of Labor has these categorizations of jobs, and they make a determination of who can do what. One of those, to have a commercial driver's license, you must be 21. To drive a semi, to drive a school bus, you must be 21. Again, what does that say? I mean, they don't trust 18-year-olds to do that job. They don't think 18-year-olds have the capability of doing that job. I can guarantee you, if you're 18 years old and you're in the military, you're probably doing stuff of that caliber, of danger, and then some. For that matter, buy, use, and possess alcohol, you could potentially be drafted to serve your country and potentially die in combat at age 18, but by God, you can't have a beer. That stuff could kill you. Gambling. At age 21, you can gamble pretty much anywhere. There is some limited gambling at age 18. I believe you can buy lottery tickets. You can buy scratch-off tickets when you're 18. You can do those. I don't think you can play video lottery when you're 18, but I'm not absolutely sure of that. I'm pretty sure you have to be 21 to play video lottery. Regardless, at age 21, gambling is fully legal for you. So this brings us to the end of our segment this time. And we've looked at all these tiny, tiny little tidbits of adulthood that are thrown at teenagers as they go from, from age 12 on up to age 21, right? Across those years. All those little tidbits of adulthood are given with a pat on the head and a smile and a big old congratulations, like it's a big deal. The reality is different. The reality is adulthood has effectively been stripped and stolen from adolescence. And these little tidbits, these little morsels that are given to them over these years are like the consolation prize. All right. We'll have a little writing assignment based on this. I want to get your thoughts. Hopefully you took a few notes as we went along, and the writing will be your opinion again, right? Based on your own experience or the experiences of others that you've been witness to, and let's hear what you have to think. about this concept of little tiny morsels of adulthood doled out over the course of years. All right, that's it. Get caught up on your assignments, everybody. Look forward to reading. I always look forward to reading everything you guys write. So that's it. Later. Bye.